All right. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I am really thrilled about today's webinar. As many of you know, normally Lindsey and I like to host these monthly webinars for folks where we normally talk about some aspect of your financial life, whether Social Security, next month we have Medicare, taxes, everyone's favorite. But today we have something a little bit different that I'm really excited about. We have Austin Lee coming in, who I've known for, what is it? It's August 28th right now. So I've known him almost 30 years. He does happen to be my brother. He's a trainer in LA. I'm going to let him introduce himself in just a minute. Just as a recap for anyone just joining us for the first time, you will be in listen only mode, but I will be monitoring the Q&A. So if you have any questions, if they come up, feel free to fire them away and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. Lindsey, as you might notice, is there, but she is going to be unable to join for today. So she does send her well wishes and best regards to all of you. So with that, I'm going to let my brother, Austin Lee, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Yes, please, at any moment, if you have questions, please feel free to interrupt me. I have no problem with that. So please bother Andrew and interrupt me, and we'll get those questions addressed. Like Andrew said, yes, I'm a personal trainer and functional strength coach based in the LA area. I have been doing this for over 7 years. I have trained everything from collegiate athletes. I worked at my alma mater, Linfield University in Oregon. I worked at my alma mater as a as a strength and conditioning specialist. Worked with our football team, our basketball team, and our track and field team. In addition to that, I've had clients who were, I think the oldest client I ever had was 96, and everything between. So I've trained all different types of bodies. The most important thing for me is I treat them all the same. So the progression and the implements and the things that we're using might differ from person to person, but the fundamental philosophy behind the training program is the same. I played football. I am currently competing in Ironmans, powerlifting, trail running, really any fitness sport that I can get my hands on. So I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of things. So hopefully I can share some of that knowledge with you guys today. So yes.
So really quick, while we go ahead and dive in here and Austin talks about, health and wellness and nutrition and all those things, I wanted to sprinkle in a little flavor for how we at McKay like to get outside and exercise and stay healthy and everything like that. On the left, we have Nathan, and on the right, we have me. I think this might be the same trail at Mount Rainier. So that's a fun little piece that I found. And then in the middle, we have Julia at Rattlesnake Ledge, as many of you may recognize.
Love rattlesnake. Okay, the three main components that I look at for an exercise program. Cardiovascular, I like to think of this just as any type of prolonged movement. It should be something that is enjoyable. We are doing this for our physical health. We are not doing this to burn as many calories as possible. It should be something that's enjoyable, sustainable, something that you like to get out and do, whether it's hiking, walking. I'm a runner, but I don't typically recommend people run if you don't enjoy it. Water walking is great. I know that's getting a lot more popular. Different things in the water can be fantastic forms of cardiovascular training. So that is the first component. The second component is mobility and flexibility. Now think of these just like stretching, just different types of stretching. Flexibility is going to be your total range of motion. So if someone's laying flat down on a table and I isolate all their other joints and I take the leg and I extend it as high as it possibly goes without snapping, that is your joints flexibility. Mobility is going to be that range of motion that you can control. So how far you can comfortably get that leg up without any extra assistance. So I focus a lot more on mobility training as opposed to total flexibility. And finally, strength training. For me, this is number one. This is the focal point of all exercise programs. What we're trying to do with strength training is we're trying to train our muscles, our joints to be able to handle higher loads and produce more force. So that is the goal of strength training, and that can be done with body weight, that can be done with different machines, that can be done with different weighted implements, but really everything that we're doing should, in my opinion, should focus around strength training. So moving on, why do we strength train? I could talk about this alone for an hour, so we're just going to kind of go through this pretty quickly. It is far and away the number one way to improve your bone density. A caveat of a lot of these is when applied appropriately. So when applied appropriately, it is the best way to improve your bone density. If you do too much too fast, you can have more specific bone injuries. But when it's progressed and applied appropriately, it's a great way to improve your bone density as we get older. It's going to relieve arthritic pain, again, when applied appropriately. If you do a proper dose and progress it correctly, then it's going to relieve a lot of those arthritic pains and symptoms. It is the number one way to improve your body composition. A common misconception that most coaches are fighting in the industry is that cardiovascular training should be the way that we address body composition changes. That's just not true. The analogy that I like to use is that you have two people who make identical amounts of money. One person takes that money and puts it in their pocket and they just hold on to that money forever. The other person takes that money and they invest it. I'm not going to be the one to tell you how to invest it. That's what Andrew's here for. I don't know anything about that. So, but one person takes that money and invests it. So building muscle is going to be that invested money because it's more metabolically active. So the more muscle you build, the more calories you're burning at rest on a daily basis. So it improves a lot of things in our body, but it's the number one way to improve body composition. Strength, balance, and coordination, that's pretty straightforward. We're trying to challenge all three of those things when we're doing strength training. We're trying to put you in somewhat compromised positions, again, applied appropriately. We're trying to challenge your body's natural strength. We're trying to challenge and put you in unbalanced situations. We're trying to improve that coordination. So that's a pretty clear one there. Reduce risk of certain chronic conditions, things like diabetes, different cardiovascular diseases, depression, and even some forms of cancer can be drastically reduced with regular strength training. You're going to improve your body's immune response pretty dramatically just by regularly strength training. And finally, it's neuroprotective, meaning the neurological benefits of all exercise, but particularly strength training, is massive. We're going to see improved cognition, increased resistance to degenerative neurological conditions like Alzheimer's and dementia. We can actually pretty drastically slow down the progression of those diseases, which is insane. Like, it's incredible. And finally, it's going to improve your mood and your stress response. Sometimes it might dampen your mood a little bit, depending on how difficult your session is. But overall, it's going to improve your mood and your body's response to stress. So, breaking news. I know this is a big deal. Yes, exercise is great for us. There's tons of benefits. Like I said, I could talk about it for an hour. Just wanted to get into some more of the specifics there. Specifics of strength training. Right here, we can see there's 4 subcategories of strength training. Number 1 being power. So we want to think about power training as low volume, really, really heavy weight, and moving that weight with intention and with speed. Next up is going to be strength training, which I know it's a subcategory, but more specifically, strength is a subcategory of strength training. This is, again, heavier weight, so probably similar weight to what we do in power training, but we're focusing on more control and more slower contractions, not trying to move that weight as fast as possible. Next is hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is very similar to strength training, but it's a little bit lower in terms of total load and total weight, and a little bit higher in volume. After that is endurance, which is really, really low weight, but pretty high repetitions, pretty high volume. For most people, strength and hypertrophy are where we want to spend most of our time. Power and endurance tend to be more geared towards specific athletes, so I'm really not going to talk too much about those. However, it's important to make sure that we're changing the stimulus we're doing. I know a lot of people get into a routine with strength training and they do the same set, the same rep, and the same weight forever. And it's great. We're still going to elicit a lot of benefits out of that. However, our body's really, really good at adapting to the stimulus that we put on it. So after a couple weeks, it becomes important to continue to see benefits of that exercise program. And in order to do that, we have to change the stimulus we're doing. Typically, I will be changing with clients and athletes. I'll be changing every 4 to 6 weeks. We're going to change that stimulus. And there's different ways to do that we can talk about later. But this just helps us avoid plateaus, which are frustrating. I mean, everyone hits one at some point in their strength training life. And it's frustrating because you're working just as hard, but you stop seeing the benefits. So easy way to avoid that is just make sure we're changing our stimulus pretty regularly. One thing to note here, Just because you're using weights does not mean you are strength training. Now, I do not want to pick on group fitness classes, but this is where I see it the most. They'll have people grab some pretty small weights, something that's pretty comfortable, and you're basically just moving nonstop the entire class, which, don't get me wrong, there's profound benefit to that, and that is excellent, but that's cardiovascular training. So we have to differentiate between what is actually challenging our body and our central nervous system to build more muscle, to produce more strength, and what is just doing what I call cardio training with weights. So moving on, resistance recommendations. Okay, these are not the gospel. Do not take these as like a hard, fast rule. This is just a good place for most people to start. There's going to be so much individual variance here. It depends on what your experience is, what you want to accomplish, how quickly you want to accomplish it. But generally speaking, most people, I would like them to be training 1 to 3 times per week. Each of those sessions should have 1 to 3 sets of each major muscle group. Each of those sets should probably, for our purposes, probably have 6 to 12 repetitions in each set. And then lastly, the resistance. So the load, the difficulty of each of those repetitions should probably be around 70 to 80 to 85% of your 1 rep max. Your 1 rep max is going to be how much weight you can do on a given exercise one time with complete control. Now, something that is really, really important to think about in these recommendations, you want to think about the objective of each session. So don't just go in and check the box and complete the session. Actively think about, we are trying to improve the quality of movement, the quantity of movement, and the load that we're using over time. And really in that order. We have to do quality first. We have to make sure you're moving with good control, good form, good technique, moving in a safe way. Once we do that, we can start to add some volume on. And once we do that, we can start to add some weight on. Again, this is all over time. So no one session is that important, but the culmination of how we're progressing each of those sessions over time is really what we want to focus on. And then thinking about the objective of each exercise. We want to move through complete range of motion with as much control as possible. So this is that differentiation between flexibility and mobility. I want you to have good mobility in each exercise you're doing, and we want to have good control of that mobility. If someone has great flexibility, but no mobility, they're going to struggle with a lot of these exercises. Last note on this, we want to treat exercises like a skill. It really is. These are very, very high skill movements, and we need to treat them as such. Most people think they know things and move through them a little bit too quickly, but if you ride a unicycle and you haven't ridden a unicycle in 10 years, you're not going to go hop out on and go around Lake Sammamish as fast as you can. Like, treat it like a skill. It really is a skill. So treat it as such and make sure we are progressing it as such. Sorry, I lied. One last thing. And I might be speaking directly to my brother about this one, but what you can handle is not necessarily optimal from an adaptation standpoint. Just because you can get through the session and get through the exercise does not mean it's optimal to adapt. We want to make sure we are doing appropriately dosed loads and volumes. So maybe that one was just for you, Andrew. But
I may have more back injuries, but I can still out deadlift.
Exactly. All right. Moving on to exercise selection. Functional training. This is a term that has been completely bastardized by the strength and conditioning world. People interpret functional training as really, really unique, weird exercises that are really difficult to balance in stability and coordination. No, functional training is just picking exercises that mimic what you do in your daily life. Now, obviously, that's going to differ from person to person quite a bit, but these fundamental movement patterns that we see right here are things that everyone does on a daily basis without really thinking about it. But these are the main things. Every single person I train is going to follow some variation of these exercises, some progression, some regression, but it's going to be a squat, which is chest up tall, shoulders back, bending at our knees primarily, a hinge or a deadlift, or in this beautiful diagram here, it's what they call a bend. This is basically just hinging at our hips instead of our knees. So same posture, same technique, shoulders back, but hinging through our hips. It's a more hip dominant movement. A lunge, everyone knows a lunge. It's your feet are split, 1 foot in front, 1 foot behind, and you're bending at your knees. After that, we have a push and a pull, horizontal pull, push, or vertical push, vertical pull. These are the upper body movements. Every upper body exercise we're going to do is going to be some variation of these. And then finally, core training. I could talk a long time about this. Most people train their core wrong. I will not have any of my clients or athletes doing any sort of sit-ups or crunches or any variations of those. We want to be training things that are actually resisting different movements. That's what help keeps our spine and our internal organs safe. So we are not going to be doing any flexing or extending of that spine. Okay, moving on. So I drew up just a few quick sample weeks. We've got 3 different levels. Again, not the gospel. These are super, super basic, just to kind of give you an idea of what a beginning, an intermediate, and a more advanced program might look like. Each of these is going to be 2 times a week. As you can see, day 1, we've got sitting down to a chair, we've got wall push-ups, and we've got standing Supermans. That's a regression of a deadlift posture, but we're going to do each of those exercises for 2 sets and 10 repetitions per set. You would be warming up before all this. You would be resting between sets. This is just kind of showing the meat and potatoes, the nitty-gritty of the actual exercises we're picking. And that's it. So those 3 exercises, and then we'd move on to day 2. So, if you did that on Monday, we'd probably wait until at least Wednesday, but maybe even Thursday or Friday until that next session. That's going to be a glute bridge, an elevated plank, and a lateral arm raise. Now you'll notice there's a little bit different volume schemes here. So the first day we're doing 2 sets of 10 repetitions. So fewer sets, but a little more volume. Day 2 is going to be more sets and less volume per set. The reason for that is just exactly what we talked about earlier. It's about changing that stimulus that we're doing. Some people change it every 4 to 6 weeks. Some people change it actually in each week. Either way is fine. There's a ton of different ways to set up these programs to make them progressive, but that is what a beginner week would look like. Moving on to like an intermediate, someone who's definitely got some skill, some background, some experience training. We're going to be using a lot of machine weights here. First day is going to be a leg press machine, a chest press machine, that's horizontal push, and then the last one is going to be a lat pull down, which is pulling down vertically. Each of those exercises, 3 sets, 10 repetitions. Day 2 is going to look like a Romanian deadlift. This is a variation of a traditional deadlift in which we're standing and then hinging at our hips coming forward. A seated rowing machine, that is our horizontal pull. And then lastly, we've got our vertical push, which is going to be an overhead shoulder press machine. So as you can see in this day, in this week, we've got each of those fundamental movement patterns that we're hitting. We're just changing the stimulus depending on the day. And that's just how we, again, make sure we continue to progress each exercise. Lastly, an advanced workout. This is something most people definitely do not start here. Most people don't even get here. Barbell exercises are very, very advanced, but this is what it would look like. We'd be doing a barbell squat with the bar across your back, squatting down, a bench press, and then pull-up or an assisted pull-up. Each of those 4 sets, 10 repetitions. And then day 2 is going to be a barbell deadlift, a bent over row, and a military press. This is where this set and rep scheme you see here is 5 sets, 5 repetitions. That is what would be more considered a true strength day. It's really, really low volume. You're only doing 5 repetitions per set, but we're focusing on pushing that weight pretty bit. So this is, again, very advanced, but I just wanted to give you guys a quick idea of what these weeks might look like. Okay.
Yeah, here we have just another little sprinkling of how we here at McKay like to get outside. On the left is Lindsey. I believe that was the Snoqualmie half marathon that she did, I want to say earlier this year. Upper right is Nathan at he goes to so many different far-flung alpine lakes. I'm not sure which this one is off the top of my head, but feel free to ask him. I'm sure he would love to talk about it with you. And then there's me down in the lower right. I believe that's on Helen's. Just another little sprinkling of how we like to get outside.
Awesome. I love that. Okay, looking at different obstacles. Obviously, there's a lot of things that get in the way. These are the most common ones that I see and that people tell me. Time, I get it. It's a lot of people I hear all the time. Oh, I just don't have the time to get into a program right now. you got to make the time. There's nothing more important than putting our health first and putting our body first. If you don't take care of your body, you can't take care of the other people in your life. You can't take care of the other things in your life. Your body's got to come first. You got to take care of that. You got to make time for it. And as we can see with these example weeks, it can be as simple as 2 times a week for 30 minutes each session, or it could be once a week for 15 minutes. Starting with anything is going to be more effective. So make time for it, even if it's just once a week for 15 minutes. Facilities, a lot of people don't have access to a gym or access to equipment. I totally understand this. This is a very real thing. There are a lot of great programs. Silver Sneakers is one that comes to mind that will provide subsidized or even entirely free gym memberships. I think Silver Sneakers is for people over the ages of 65, but there's a lot of programs like that. If you don't want to go to a gym, if you'd prefer to do your resistance training or your strength training either at home or out and about, I love suspension trainers. You can get one for like $80 on Amazon or something. It's something that you can attach it to a wall, you can attach it to a tree, so when you're out on your beautiful hikes, you can get some strength training in as well, and you can really do any exercise with a suspension trainer. So there's a lot of ways to work around that. You do not have to go to a gym 2 to 3 times a week if you don't want to. It's totally fine. Knowledge and experience. Again, a lot of people don't even know how to get started, or where to start. There's tons of great resources available online to get started. Pretty much any gym, if you do decide to go to the gym or take that route, every gym that I've ever worked at or ever been to will provide new members with an initial assessment, an initial session with a personal trainer. So take advantage of that. Ask them a lot of questions, pick their brain. Like, trust me, like, we love talking about this stuff. So like, take advantage of that session, take advantage of those resources, and ask as many questions as you can. In addition to this one, I'm happy to provide any of you who want with a free 20-30 minute consultation after this. My contact information will be listed at the end. So I'd be happy to meet with you and help set up a plan or just progress on this a little bit more. Lastly, injury or any physical limitations. First and foremost, if you do have a specific injury, whether it's soft tissue, bone, joint, whatever, please consult with your physical therapist or your doctor before starting any of this. Just make sure you do that. That being said, appropriately dosed exercise will really help heal most or I think all injuries, as long as you don't do too much. You make it progressive, you start slow and build that strength over time. Starting with the lowest effective dose. This is kind of what we talked about with Andrew earlier. He has a habit of going after it because he's a really strong dude, but sometimes he takes some time off and comes back and tries to do exactly what he did before. Starting with the lowest effective dose is how I like to progress everyone. I want to do just enough that's gonna be strenuous. You can tell you're doing something, but it's not going to be overwhelming. In doing this, we're going to help acclimate our tissues over time. Some of our tissues take longer to adapt than others. So if we try and progress too quickly, that's where you're going to get some overuse injuries, some muscle strains, some ligament tears, some stuff like that we really want to avoid. So making sure we're using the lowest effective dose is a really, really good strategy to prevent that.
Maybe building off of that, Austin, we have our first question.
Yeah.
On the progression that you showed earlier for beginning, intermediate, advanced. Is there a kind of rule of thumb for setting the weight of the equipment, or how much weight should you know to begin with? How do you go about figuring that out?
That's a great question. It's pretty hard. I think it's going to come with experience. Most people just starting out have a tendency to not use enough. So most people that I've worked with have these mental restrictions of thinking like, oh, I can't possibly chest press 50 pounds 10 times. So I think if you're using machine or if you're using a body weight progression, that's where I'm okay with you pushing it a little bit more to find that threshold and find what an appropriate load is. If you shouldn't be using free weights if you're not used to them yet, if you don't know your weights. So I would say just play with it a little bit. You kind of have to find that balance with experience and with time. Start slow, and then once we get to working sets, you want to be doing a weight that's challenging towards the last set of the last towards the last few reps of the last set, but you should never really be close to the point of failure, as in you're not going to be able to complete the set, if that makes sense.
Great, thank you.
Yep. All right, nutrition. Again, this is another topic that we could talk about for hours. I'm not going to, because I don't think we have that kind of time, but there's a few key rules. There's so much individual variance with nutrition. It's going to depend a lot on the individual and their needs. However, I think there are a lot of specific things, or there are a lot of general things that I like to preach for everyone. Number one is protein intake. Most Americans underconsume protein pretty drastically. I think the recommended daily allowance of protein should be a lot higher than it is, but that's not a topic for today. The benefits of protein in our body are huge. It's going to provide us with satiety, so it's going to keep us full for longer than something like a carbohydrate. This helps tremendously with body composition goals. If you have goals to lose a little bit of weight, if you want to improve your body composition from a body fat percentage standpoint, eating foods that are going to keep you full and satiated a little bit longer are going to be more beneficial for that goal. Protein helps build and maintain our muscles, our bones, our joints, and other soft tissues. It builds hormones and enzymes. And I mean, the list of things that protein does in our body is tremendous. It's very essential to most functions of our body. And the recommendation that I like to start with for someone who's looking to build muscle, and if you're strength training, that's the objective, is 0.5 to 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. So for me, I'm about 200 pounds. That would look like 100 to about 160 grams of protein, and that's per day. So most people that I know are really not close to that recommendation. And that's just kind of a ballpark. Like I said, a ton of individual variance, but that is a pretty good ballpark to be looking at that window. Water, another thing that is criminally underconsumed in today's society. I think water is essential to all cells and all functions in our body. The recommendation for that is half your body weight in ounces. So again, I'm 200 pounds. My starting point would be about 100 ounces per day. That's a lot, but it's very, very important in our body. Now, things that would affect that recommendation are going to be exercising. So like if you're sweating, if you're moving around regularly and sweating, you need a little bit more. If you're drinking coffee, and if you're drinking alcohol, if you're doing any one or all three of those things, then you should probably increase that recommendation by about 10 to 20 ounces per each activity of that you're doing. Finally, carbohydrates. Carbohydrates get used as a scapegoat, and they get demonized a lot in today's society. And I agree, over consuming like hyper processed and hyper palatable carbohydrates is not good. We definitely want to avoid some of those. But at the same time, carbohydrates are essential for optimal performance. And the point of these exercises, the point of each session we're doing is to increase our body's performance. So trying to do a lot of volume of exercise and trying to improve our body's strength without optimal carbohydrate intake is really, really challenging. So you're going to be struggling on energy if you're not eating enough carbohydrates. So again, tons of individual variance there, but that is some general rules I think most people should follow. All right, supplements. Supplements are incredibly overrated, so I'm not going to talk about them a lot. They should never replace something like they should never come before proper sleep, proper nutrition, proper hydration, proper programming. But they should really be that last slice of the pie, that last thing we're looking at to help increase some of our body's functions. The most effective supplement in the world is going to be whatever vitamin, mineral, or other nutrient that you are deficient in. So I know a lot of you are in the Northwest. If you're not getting as much sunshine as we have in Southern California on a daily basis, vitamin D is a great place to start. So basically whatever nutrient that you're deficient in, which you can find out by meeting with a doctor, that is going to be the most important supplement for you. Moving on, creatine. Creatine is a supplement that has been used for a long time in the sport performance world. It is an incredibly studied and incredibly safe supplement that has tremendously profound muscle building benefits. In addition to that, it has pretty significant benefits for your immune system pretty significant benefits for your brain health. And it actually has been proven to be anti-carcinogenic, meaning it helps reduce our risk for certain types of cancers. Fish oil, if you're not getting an, oh, I'm sorry, I have one more note on creatine. If you are vegetarian or vegan, I definitely recommend creatine even more. Most people are going to get their dietary creatine from red meat. So if you're not getting any of that, it might be a little bit more important. It might be something for you to look into or talk to your doctor about, but I think it's especially important for people who are not regularly eating red meat. Okay, moving on to fish oil. Fish oil is another tremendous supplement if you're not getting enough omega-3s, omega-3 fatty acids in your diet. It's going to help prevent heart disease and stroke. It's going to reduce triglyceride and cholesterol levels in your blood. And similar to creatine, it has profound effects for our brain health and has also been proven to be anti-carcinogenic in a lot of cases. Lastly, different supplements to affect your joint health. We're really going to be looking at calcium, vitamin D, and glucosamine. These are great supplements to help reduce inflammation in your joints. It's going to support your joints. It's going to support your bones. It's going to help maintain cartilage in your joints. So great supplements to look into. Talk to your doctor about some of these. But yeah, that's all I got for supplements.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So some more pictures here. On the left is Lindsey McKay up on Panorama Point on Mount Rainier, a few thousand feet up. At least I think that's Mount Rainier. It might be Mount Everest. I can't remember what she did there. And she's not here to defend herself, so I'm going to say it's Mount Everest. On the right, Nathan O'Connor up by Spider Gap in the Glacier Peak Wilderness. One of my absolute favorite pieces of nature in the state. Quick question from Cindy Richardson. This is being recorded, and we are going to be sending it out in about a week, typically, as well as some other deliverables I'm going to talk about later, but you will get those. And then a question from Roshan Kloon. Austin, I'm going to kick this to you and then explain the third photo. Can you tell us how much water that we should be drinking again?
Yeah, we're looking at about half your body weight in ounces. So for a 200-pound individual, we're probably looking to start at about 100 ounces, maybe a little bit higher if you're regularly sweating, drinking alcohol, and drinking coffee or caffeine.
Perfect, thank you. And then that middle photo, that is me in the orange. This was actually not a hike. I was trying to recreate our father's commute to and from school. So that's what that's from. So some local resources. So Austin talked a lot about nutrition and the importance of exercise and a program and working with a personal trainer, someone who knows what they're doing and can really kind of help guide through different strength training resources and programs and things like that. As you can see, we are all very passionate about the great outdoors. Austin, we had to catch him in between different trail runs and different bike rides around the Hollywood Hills. So I appreciate him taking time out of his day there. But in the Northwest here, we have just so many different resources, so many different things to do. There's hiking, kayaking, mountain climbing, but getting started can sometimes feel very overwhelming and very daunting. So I put together a list of resources, and this will be one of the deliverables that I'm going to be sending out with the recording that I mentioned. The Mountaineers, in all transparency, is very near and dear to my heart. That's where my partner and I met, doing a sort of learn to mountaineer class. They teach everything from learn to hike, learn to snowshoe, hiking conditioning classes. They teach learn to rock climb, learn to mountaineer, learn to sea kayak, and kind of any and everything in between there. They're located in Seattle, but they got different sort of satellite locations up and down the state. Bow Alps, excuse me, that stands, I believe, for Boeing Employees Alpine Society. There we go. So if you or a loved one are affiliated with that small airplane manufacturer that is in town, they have an Alpine Climbing Society where they teach many of the same skills that the Mountaineers do. The Mazamas are located, I believe, in Portland. Again, many of the same skills Mountaineers do, but for those folks, I know we got a couple listeners I see in Oregon. That could be a resource maybe a little closer to you. Outward Bound is a national organization. Again, they teach any and everything that has to do with the outdoors. You can go to meetup.com and there will be different groups for anything that you're interested in, that go to Mount Si, go to some of the more well-known hiking destinations in the area. Meetup groups might be going to rock climbing gyms, really any and everything that you're looking for. Social media, I know that whenever I'm going out on a trail, I'll look to the Facebook or to different sort of Instagram accounts to look to see any recent trail reports, photos, what does everything look like there. Washington Trails Association, for my money, is one of Washington State's sort of best kept secrets. You can go in there and you can plug in, I want to do a 3 mile hike with 100 feet of elevation within, an hour and a half of Seattle, that's dog friendly, and it'll pop up a whole list of different trips for you, along with trip reports and everything else. It's a really, really fantastic resource. The Cascade Bicycle Club, they host the Seattle to Portland bike ride. They host the RSVP, which I think is Ride from Seattle to Vancouver and Party is what that stands for. They host a variety of different bike events, and also just learn to bike camp, a bunch of different resources there. Turns All Year, if you're into skiing or snowboarding, this is exactly what it sounds like. It's an online community that shares resources and information on, right now it's late August, but there are people that are still out there on, up on Adams or wherever, trying to get their turns in. The last two, Outdoors for All and Unlikely Hikers, it's been a big shift the last couple of years in the outdoor industry towards getting folks who have historically been underrepresented in the outdoor community, getting them outside. So people of color, people of different body shapes and capabilities and everything like that. If you feel that some of these other resources don't represent you, I'd really recommend looking at Outdoors for All or Unlikely Hikers as well. Something else I want to talk about and be cognizant of is that life happens, and what we maybe once enjoyed doing, we don't have the capacity to do anymore. Or you want to get outside with a loved one, but again, life happens. Maybe disease, injury prevents you from maybe in your mind enjoying the outdoors to the extent that you once did. The Seattle Times put together this really great article that I linked at the bottom, but again, I'll send out as well, on getting outdoors with those who have maybe limited mobility issues. So what does that look like? That looks like trail width of at least 30 inches. So think ADA accessible, wheelchair accessible, and also trails that are free of tripping hazards and blockages, which can be a huge impediment, as you can imagine, and sometimes a little difficult to sort of navigate in the outdoors. So roots, rocks, trees, steps, transitions, and things like that. That's great, but what does that actually look like? Well, they put together these 9 hikes throughout the state, mostly located in northwestern Washington. A couple of these I love going to. I really, really like Gold Creek Pond down there in the lower right, exit 54 off of I-90. I love going there and catching a sunset. It's a really great place for autumn colors. Same with Artist Point and Picture Lake up there in the upper right, up by Mount Baker. Important to note that there's a huge seasonality aspect with in this lovely state of ours, that Gold Creek Pond again is right by Snoqualmie Pass, and Artist Point is right by Mount Baker. So both of those will be inaccessible during the winter. So this isn't, a stamp of approval to use year round if you have limited mobility issues, but we have a couple more weeks of summer, hopefully. These gray skies be darned, where you can get outside and still enjoy. I know that my significant other and I love going up to Artist Point right before it closes for the season, because the fall colors are just so tough to beat up there. So here we have again another sort of depiction of how we can all enjoy the outdoors. On the right, we have Norma, who was golfing and ran across some peacocks, and what a fun way to enjoy birding in general. My significant other and I are getting really into birding. We found an app that allows you to just kind of record ambient noise, and it'll tell you what the different chirps and calls and whistles are and everything like that. And that's just a really cool way to enjoy just being out in your backyard or on the golf course or wherever. In the middle, we have Nathan, who again is, his his version. He's a big hiker, and I am big and a hiker. So, two different types there. But he likes being at, finding those alpine lakes in far flung regions of the state with no cell service. So God love him. On the left, I'm fortunate enough to live by Lake Tapps, so we like putting the kayaks in the water and just traveling out a little bit to look at Rainier. So really a bunch of different ways, different avenues we can all kind of enjoy the outdoors. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Austin. We have a couple questions here. I'm going to try and get this cleaned up. We talked about the water. No, no surfing. There is absolutely surfing. That's a great question. Shame on me. Certainly surfing in LA, where Austin maybe is more familiar from, but there's certainly surfing out here on the coast. If you go out to Westport, I know has some. I'm not too familiar with other surfing spots in the area, so for the individual who asked that, I would love for you to share any resources you have, and that goes for
Bring a
everyone here.
wetsuit.
Bring a wetsuit for sure. And then that goes for everyone here too. Again, we're going to be providing these resources out to you as well as the recording, but we want this to be more of a dialogue. If you have something that you're super passionate about, you want to share with us, resources that you think could be helpful for other people listening on the call, we'd love to hear that. So for that individual, I don't want to name any names here, but who posed surfing, absolutely. Tell me the best surfing spots to go where you're familiar with. And then there was a question about joint health supplements other than calcium supplements.
Yeah, we would look at vitamin D and glucosamine. There's a couple other naturopathic ones that have, some less sturdy evidence behind them, but vitamin D and glucosamine, most of which would be in a multivitamin, are going to be the most beneficial ones. But check your multivitamin. If you take one, a lot of them will already have those things in them.
Perfect. Thank you. If there are no other questions, then I think, we got one more here. I've heard a lot about superfoods. What exactly are superfoods? How do we become super, I guess, is the takeaway there.
Superfoods are a marketing ploy. No, not to poo-poo some of these foods. There's a lot of things that have great nutritional value, but mostly they will get labeled as such as an effort to sell a new supplement or sell a new type of eating or type of lifestyle. But most things that are labeled as superfoods are good fruits or vegetables that have some benefit, but there's really nothing that I look at as something that everyone has to have, and this is the vegetable, this is the food you must eat. So generally speaking, they're a marketing tool.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much. There is Austin's contact information. Appreciate you sharing that. Really appreciate you offering that 20 to 30-minute consultation for our clients. Anyone interested there?
Absolutely.
If there are no other questions, we thank you so much again for joining us, and we will be sending, that the recording of this in about a week, as well as that deliverable that I mentioned. Thank you so much for your help. Next month we have a Medicare webinar, so stay tuned for that. Really excited for that one as well. And in the meantime, I hope everyone enjoys the last couple of weeks of summer, even if it doesn't quite look like it here, with these light gray overcast skies at least. Take care, stay healthy, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.